you're responsible for the reality you've created, right? It's not the economy, it's not your upbringing, it's you, right? How do you change the results that you want in your life? You've got to change how you think, feel, and act. You can't affirm your way to wealth. Like downloading money affirmations from Pinterest and repeating them every morning is not going to make you wealthy. You've also got to take action that is aligned to the higher version of yourself who has the results you want. The paycheck is not truly yours. It can be taken away from you any day. I went from being a high performer, and 6 months later I was put on a performance improvement plan. And I think that was when I really woke up to the reality of, wow, the tables can turn so fast in a corporate career. I quit. And I realized after I left that, again, my identity was very much tied to my paycheck, right? Which is one of the things I help women break free from.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Financially Incorrect. I am your host, Barak. By the time this episode is out, we will have gone to Uganda and hopefully we would have had a great and fantastic time. Of course, as you know, this podcast is proudly sponsored by none other than FX Pesa. So please do yourself a favor, do me a favor. You can click all the links in the description box to be able to find out more about FX Pesa. They give you access to trading in the global market. They also teach you how to do this, and this is online if you are in Uganda and Tanzania. However, you can go to the physical locations, physical offices of FX Pesa. Just Google them, find out where they are, and you can be able to go and ensure that I guess you can physically learn about how to trade and get on with that journey. Of course, as usual, I'm sitting on this seat, so it means I have a money story that I am looking to discuss or learn about and hear about. And I have none other than her name is Rebecca Muriuki, who's here, who actually is a friend. I'd say go so far as a friend of Kerubo, who was here like, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago by the time this episode is going up. And she is, allow me to please read this from my phone. We're working on getting a teleprompter, guys. Then it would look a bit more seamless. But so she's a sovereign wealth strategist and a creator of the Wealth Liberation Method, TM, a transformational mentorship for women ready to exit systems of financial dependence, whether that's a job, a partner, a business, or outdated cultural expectation. She teaches high achieving women how to recalibrate their identity, build property backed income streams, and create sovereign wealth that doesn't ask for permission to live the life that they want to live. In under 8 months, Rebecca has acquired 3 short-term rental properties worth $250,000 and now generates between $5,000 to $7,000 a month on average. Anyway, so she's on a couple of fun facts about her. She does have a podcast called the STR Property Podcast. She's an STR investor of a growing portfolio across South and East Africa. She's a qualified actuary and former associate director at Deloitte with over 12 years of experience. And she's a certified mind coach and business owner for the last 5 years. Welcome to Financially Incorrect.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And thank you for such a brilliant introduction.
I mean, it would look so much better with like a teleprompter, so that doesn't look like I'm reading off the phone. So we'll work on getting that to ensure that we're able to like get proper introductions, and I can look at you, well, sort of feign look at you and look at the teleprompter at the same time. But to start, I have a couple of actually, before I get into the questions I have off of your bio, are you big on Father's Day? Because this is like, Father's Day month, this month of June. And as I say this, I realize in all the episodes before this, I haven't talked about Father's Day at all. But yeah, are you big on Father's Day?
I would say yes, although maybe my partner might argue. Not much, but I love celebrating the men in my life because as much as I am a woman empowerment mentor and I love supporting women, I also want to acknowledge the role that the men in my life have played. Yeah. My partner, my spouse, who has supported me throughout all the ups and downs in all the evolutions of my life with him. My father, who was the rock of our family when my mom passed away when I was young. So I think we need to do more.
Yeah.
Personally, I think as women, we can do more to acknowledge and celebrate
The fathers.
yeah, the fathers, and it doesn't take away from our achievements. It doesn't take away from our desires or our stands, to support women more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who do you think? I don't know if your father is still alive.
Yeah, he is.
He is fantastic because or how, I guess how you'd phrase the statement. You know how there's this like societal riddle about, and it's especially for men. Um, if you're getting into your car and you're with your mom and your partner, or your mom, your girlfriend, or mom and wife, who sits at the front, right? And there's like a whole debate about who ought to sit at the front, whether it's your wife, whether it's your mom. So I want to sort of, with that logic, flip this on its head and ask you, who do you think you ought to appreciate more on Father's Day? Your father or the father of your children?
Appreciate more.
Yeah.
That is a difficult question to answer because they have played very different roles. They don't play the same role at all. And obviously, my father has been my father for longer in my life than my husband has been my husband. So, answering the question about the car, I would say who's the owner of the car. If it's me and my husband, then yeah, by default, my husband gets to sit in front. But I appreciate them very differently, to be honest. And I don't think one is above the other.
So you think they're like equal but different?
Yeah, that's my view.
I was joking with my daughters when we were getting ready to celebrate Mother's Day, and so I was asking them, what are you guys doing for your mom? And we got into like like a joke debate where I was saying that, but technically she's not my mom. Like my mom is someone else, and I'm appreciating my mom. So it's your job to appreciate your mom. Anyway, but it just got me thinking about that possible dynamic, and hopefully people don't come for me. I still did get my wife something from Mother's Day.
I was about to ask.
No, to be clear, I still did. It was just a joke.
Yeah.
Anyway, on to your bio. What is a sovereign wealth strategist?
Thank you for asking because I love the curiosity it brings up in it. And well, first of all, my journey in mentorship and coaching, it's been an evolution. And I realized that what I'm really here to do and help women in stepping into their power is creating something that's truly their own. And that's one of the reasons why I left my high-flying corporate job that many people were shocked when I put my resignation letter in. As much as I was creating success on paper, I feel it was an illusion because it wasn't truly mine. The paycheck is not truly yours. It can be taken away from you any day. And that's a reality that I think we know conceptually, but how we live, especially as corporate professionals, we don't, or how we treat our money, we don't treat our money and make decisions from a place of, oh, this paycheck could go. I better start building something of my own that no one will take away from me. And so that's where this concept or theme of sovereign wealth came from.
Okay. Why the word sovereign wealth? Like why the word sovereign wealth? Sovereign, more so sovereign.
Sovereign, yeah. So think of even how the word sovereign is used to represent funds that states own.
Yeah.
Right. The sovereign fund of the USA belongs to the USA. Like no one can take it. And that's really what I want women to start embodying and patterning in their money decisions and thinking about every time even when they make small money decisions like grocery shopping, or am I going to pay myself this month, or am I going to spend it on black tax or whatever. I want them to have that thought of, actually, I'm sovereign. I get to make decisions that empower me first, decisions that build my own wealth first, so that I can do all these other things in an even bigger way.
Okay. Tell me about mindset coaching. What's that about? What's that like? What does that ultimately entail? And is it any different from executive coaching or any other type of coaching that's out there?
Yeah, well, I haven't worked with an executive coach, but I would imagine that they need to understand how the mind works in order to truly help their clients. So, mindset coaching really is founded on the universal law of manifestation. So, just in case, there are some listeners who aren't familiar with this, the law of manifestation is basically about how you create the reality you live. And it's a fact. I mean, not everyone will agree with it, but you're responsible for the reality you've created, right? It's not the economy, it's not your upbringing, it's you, right? And it comes from your thoughts, your feelings, the actions you take every day. Most of them are habitual, but they are actions you take every day that eventually create the results that you have. And so even when I went to my mindset coaching certification, that was really what we were taught. Like almost every day, the coach would start with that framework: thoughts, feelings, actions create results. How do you change the results that you want in your life? You've got to change how you think, feel, and act. And they all have to be congruent. So you can't affirm your way to wealth. Like get downloading money affirmations from Pinterest and repeating them every morning is not going to make you wealthy. You've also got to take action that is aligned to the higher version of yourself who has the results you want, right? You also can't just action your way to wealth, because if you don't feel wealthy, your scarcity mindset and beliefs around, maybe you have a scarcity money mindset belief from your upbringing, or maybe you self-sabotage, or maybe you are an overspender. Those things will then affect the actions you take, right? And you will not create the results you want. So they all have to be in alignment to eventually create the reality. And it's hard work, right? If it was easy, I think we'd have so many more millionaires in the world. It's hard work, but that really is the work that's required. Even when, you shared, you were introducing me in my bio, I was just thinking at the back of my mind, how did I actually create these results? It's not because I worked at a big four audit firm and I was earning over $100,000 a year. There are many people like me who earn that money but keep very little of it. It's because I did the work to align my thoughts, my belief system, my feelings, actions, that then eventually I was able to manifest those results. So, in a nutshell, that's what I would say. That's what mindset coaching is. I mean, there are other tools that people use when it comes to mindset coaching. I am diving into human design. I don't know if you've heard of human design, but it's
Human
really
centered design or human design?
human design.
Okay.
Human design. So it's basically it's a typing system, but it's based on the energy that was around you on the day you were born. So you go to this website, Maya
Yeah.
Mechanics or whatever, you put in your date of birth, where you were born, and then it will tell you what your human design is, which is very different from other typing systems where they'll ask you, how do you think? They'll ask you questions and you will answer them based on your mind. But human design really goes into your energetic blueprint as opposed to your mind. And I mean, it's fascinating. You should go and check what your human design is. You'll be quite surprised.
I'm sure I would be,
Yeah.
because it naturally wouldn't be something I would do. And I'm going to go down this rabbit hole a little, because I
Yeah.
feel like this is a little bit like almost getting into like Terrence Howard thinking kind of territory. He talks about remembering the first memory he ever has is being born. He said that, I believe he said that on Joe Rogan's podcast. I don't remember being born. I maybe he
Neither
does.
do
I
I.
don't know. But I wonder, with some of these things, is it more out of curiosity than actual beneficial input into one's day-to-day life? Like, what's the benefit of knowing my energy blueprint or the type of human I potentially could be? And how do you really ascertain the kind of energy that that I was born into. Like how is that figured out from the gynecologist who was there and the midwife and my mom? And so, for example, I'm a twin. So is it also based on my mom says I was first, like me coming first, so my second twin brother's energy potentially could be different because of and then like just what's the overall benefit beyond curiosity?
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned a keyword there, and I wanna use that in my response. Potential. It's really in helping you understand where you can tap into your potential in the most powerful way, right? So a very good example is not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right? Some people are going to actually thrive in the corporate system, right? And understanding your human design will really help you understand how you can best tap into your potential and how you're meant to fulfill your purpose in a way that fulfills you, right? I know of people who have gone into entrepreneurship, absolutely hated it, gone back to corporate, right? But if you truly did the work to understand you more, then maybe they wouldn't have gone. But sometimes you do need to explore to really fully understand. And so for me, what has been the biggest benefit of human design is really helping me understand even how I'm meant to run my business, which is very different. There are people who love the hustle. There are people who can be working 12 hours a day, right? Non-stop, Monday to Friday, typical manifesting generators in the language of human design. I'm a projector in human design, and I best work in short bursts, right? So 4 hours a day of absolute focus, that's enough for me. The rest of the time I need to spend thinking, I need to spend by myself. But if I didn't study human design, I wouldn't know that. And that's why a lot of times in my corporate career, I would get burnt out.
Because
yeah, because I was trying to follow the blueprint of other people's human design or what was generally accepted as a sign that you are working hard and you are a high performer.
Right.
Okay. So that's I would say that's really the benefit. It's understanding you at the core and being okay with it. Being okay that it gets to be different, how you live your life gets to be different, how you run your business, how you show up at work gets to be different.
Okay. I'll definitely look into it. I mean, okay, now the way you've explained it, sort of the tail bit, and I'm like, okay, that sounds like something I'd be interested in more so than the energy side of the conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll definitely look into it and see. So I want us to get into your story. Actually, no, before we do, Formula One. You're a Formula One enthusiast.
Yes.
Who's your favorite driver? Or who do you support?
Guess.
Is it Lewis Hamilton?
Of course.
Oh, okay.
Who else?
You never know. I mean, there's Max supporters. Are you a Max supporter? Yeah, he is. I know a couple people who are Max guys.
We need to have a conversation after this.
Okay, so you must be sorely disappointed. I mean, I thought he would do better than he's doing right now. Although it's better than last season, still technically speaking.
Yeah.
But I really hope he wins that eighth title to stand alone. I really that's like in the Formula One space, which I don't. I mean, I watch all sorts of all sports, but that's like my prayer for Formula One. That getting into your story now, and I guess we just want to understand how you get to Deloitte, right? Like, what's the path you take that gets you to Deloitte? If you were to look back, sort of hindsight 2020 and tracing back from childhood, what are the different things that sort of happen that get you into this high corporate, high flyer, very difficult to get into one of the big four establishments?
Yeah,
so we can start as far back as you want to start.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't remember the day I was born.
Unlike Terrence.
Yes, but I do remember my upbringing and what that was like. So I grew up in a, typical African home. You are, drilled from a young age. You got to do well. You got to get those grades and you've got to just perform. And I mean, my parents didn't know better because that's how they got to where they are. That's how we moved from Kenya when I was very young to South Africa at the age of 3. And I am thankful for that, although now that I know better, I know how to raise my children differently. But, those were the circumstances under which I was raised. So I followed what my parents told me to do. Did well in school. I was an A student throughout my primary. I finished my high school flying colors, A student. And I'm always the woman who's this go-getter who's like, I want to do it and I want to show people that I can do it. And so when people, would ask me and it came time to decide what I wanted to study, initially I thought I was going to do accounting, and then I came across actuarial science. I'm like, what is this? I haven't heard anyone I've never heard anyone who's done this. Let me just, be curious and dig deeper into what this is. And that's the route I eventually decided to go. And I remember my high school teacher saying, this is such a difficult course. They don't know anyone who has finished this degree. The people they know who studied it, fell out after like 1 or 2 years and went into accounting. Maybe I should reconsider. And that really was fuel to the fire. I was like, not only am I going to do this, I'm going to show you how to do this in record time.
In record time.
Yeah.
Was all of this in South Africa?
All of this was in South Africa.
Okay.
Yeah. So I moved with my parents when I was about 3.
Okay. So anyway, so you can go on. So you then say you want to complete it, and not just complete it, but complete it in record time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So fortunate enough, I got a scholarship to study all my, expenses, my tuition, academics, all those fees paid. And I went to the University of Cape Town. And I get there on day 1 of lectures, and I'm like, wow, there are so many people who are way smarter than me. Because I was in this bubble all my life thinking, I'm the smartest, I'm the best. And yeah, definitely a humbling moment. But again, I just dug deep into why I'm here. There was no going back. I'm not a trust fund baby. So there was no other option other than me to finish this degree, get a good job, and get myself out of, let me not say financial poverty, but just average living, because I didn't want to live an average life.
Okay. I want to stop you there for a second because a couple of questions I want to ask before you go on too far.
Yeah.
Because even now you're talking about, well, you didn't say poverty, you said not poverty, but average life. I mean, picking up and moving to South Africa isn't the experience of the average Kenyan. So I would assume your parents were well off to some extent. What did they do? What was money like at that point? That's the first question I'll ask, just based on what we talked about so far.
Yeah, so they actually weren't well off. They just were go-getters, and they just said, we're going to apply for these jobs and we're going to see if we can get in and then create better lives for ourselves. So my mom was a doctor, and she got a job first. A medical doctor. Okay. Medical trained doctor at Nairobi Hospital, just an average doctor. And fortunately, she got an offer in one of the hospitals in South Africa. And that's how we actually moved. And then my father followed suit and, just sent his CVs to different universities. At the time, the apartheid system was, just ending. And so more Black people were now being brought into these kind of roles. And he also got a job. He was a lecturer at the time at JQuat, I think.
Before you moved, right? Okay.
Before we moved. So not wealthy by any terms, just people who were curious, who were willing to try different things, and, they got through. So, growing up, I wouldn't say I lacked, to be honest. Maybe I experienced that after my mother's death, because my mother died when I was 8. Okay. And so my father was left to be the breadwinner. And, earning as a lecturer it's not a lot of money. And my sister, so it was me and my sister that he had to raise. And we downsized, we moved houses, we changed schools from what is called in South Africa Model C schools. So these are like cream of the crop schools. And I moved to a more average public school.
Okay.
So maybe that was my first taste of lack, or, not.
Reduction.
Yeah, not being able to after school ask my mom to take me to McDonald's. I mean, those were some of the niceties of being, I guess, a doctor's daughter. But we weren't wealthy by any means. If I compare them to other friends that I knew, at other family friends that I knew at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even as you're maybe I wanna understand this a little bit because Will Smith, I think, talks about this or has a video on this. I don't know whether they did it last year or the year before, but he talks about the difference between an A and a B, and he says like the difference between a C and a B isn't that much. Like it's just a little bit more dedication, and like you'll be able to move your grade or your performance from a C to a B. But I believe he says, but the difference between a B and an A is like another stratosphere altogether. It's not the same effort or the level of work between a B and a C, for example, right? So I'm curious about what it took for you to be able to get a fully paid scholarship, or everything 100% everything covered, and for you to maintain an A sort of average all through your school, so to speak. What did that take from you or for you to be able to accomplish that?
Yeah, and that's also why I love Formula One, because like it's milliseconds that these guys are working in, but the difference between the winner and the second person is, it's like their mentality, it's not giving up, there's so many things that need to work for you to be like a tenth of a second faster than your competitor. And I think for me that's probably where my edge came from, because I knew that I was competing with other A students. I know people who had 7 straight A's from high school who didn't get scholarships. So I knew that that wasn't going to be enough. So I was so proactive. Like I applied to so many universities. I went to, at the time, internet was just starting up. Like I went on internet, Googled different scholarships. I looked for loans, bursaries. I mean, you name it. Like I put my name everywhere. I went for every single bursary interview that I was called for, because I didn't know which door would open. And some doors didn't open, but I was like a dog biting at this bone, because I knew there was no other option. I had to get in. I had to get the scholarship if I wanted to go to my university of choice. And so I think a lot of times people underestimate the amount of tenacity, resilience, this no give up attitude that is required to be at the top of your game, right? People just see the highlight reels, right? But they don't see the work behind, right, that is required in order to stand out amongst others. And you also need to know when that is the time, right? Because you also can't just push all your life, right? But that was a pivotal moment in my life, because I knew it was going to change the trajectory of my entire future. And it did.
And I mean, I guess luckily you had the foresight, in high school to be able to understand how massive moment that was going to be for you. But did it mean like if you get a B in a cat, you're like, what's going on? Like this isn't right. And now the next time you're reading like an extra 4 hours, or what kind of pressure did that? How did the pressure manifest for you?
Yes. So I would always go into solution mode. Like I would be upset for a day or two, but I was always going to solution mode. So I went for weekend schools, like Saturday and Sunday. I traveled by bus to another city to learn from one of the best schools in our province, like the teachers in that school. I did that out of my own initiative. And my dad didn't drop me with his car. I had to walk to the bus stop to do that. And I did that for 6 months straight. I looked for organizations that were offering pro bono sort of support to students who, wanted to improve in certain subjects. And I knew which subjects I needed to like absolutely do my best, math, physics, science, biology, etc. So, and again, I think it goes back to just that you you've got to just you've got to just know that just being good is not enough, like you're saying, Will Smith. You've got to be exceptional, right? And there are sacrifices that definitely you're going to have to make. But for me at that time in my life, I knew it was worth it.
Yeah.
Because there was nowhere I was going back to. Like my father was not going to be able to pay for me to be at University of Cape Town. And I wasn't going to be able to get what is it called? Allowance from him either.
Yeah.
So I knew that this was my one chance and I had to just nail it. So I did everything I could. And I'm actually very proud of who I was at the time, because I could have easily just been like, you know what, I'm just gonna coast my way through this and see how things go.
Yeah.
Right. But I guess also it's part of who I am, my design. I'm not the kind of person who just sits back and just accepts the status quo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So so what happens now? Because you've talked about now getting to Cape Town University and coming to the realization that there are people who are smarter than you. I guess you can continue the story for us from again, because we're looking to how you end up at Deloitte, right?
Yes.
So what happens next?
Yes. So, the shock of my life when I get to uni and see so many other smart people. But I was like, I am not giving up. I am not giving up. And so I remember the first semester was rough, like getting 60s and 50s. I was like, what is going on? But I was like, I'm not giving up. I have to try everything. And I finished my first year. I got admitted so in actuarial science, just because you get a 50 and above doesn't mean you get admitted to the second year courses. There's like a higher threshold, which I don't really understand why, but I guess it's part of the prestige of being an actuary. Fortunately, I passed the threshold for the minimum subjects I needed, or the minimum marks I needed in the subjects to get admitted into the second year courses. And if you don't get admitted into the second year courses, that means you now have to do your degree over 5 years. And I knew that wasn't an option for me either. But fortunately, just that no give up mentality, and also surrounding myself with other people who came from similar backgrounds who, they knew there was nowhere they were going back to. They had to do well, was really made a huge difference. So got into second year, finished my degree in record time. And when it came now time to look for jobs, I started very early, much earlier than most of my friends, because I knew I couldn't afford to sit at home for 6 months waiting to be called for interviews. So I did a lot of vacation work during my 4 years. I don't even know how I thought of these things, but I was like, I need to build these relationships so that when it comes time for interviews, these guys are going to remember me, right? And also for pocket money. So I had already worked at a few companies while I was in uni. And so those were the first ones that I applied to. And I guess it's no surprise that I got an offer at PwC, where I had vacation work quite a few times because they knew me. And I think it did play a role in them eventually giving me an offer.
Yeah.
So graduated, get into the workplace, and again, another culture shock. I'm the only Black woman in this team. Everyone else is white. Everyone is talking about the rugby match on the weekend. I am totally floating. Everyone is talking about the holidays they went to at Disney World. I don't have stories like that. And so again, I find myself in this place where I'm like, how do I fit in? Just feeling again like I don't belong. The same way I felt when I entered the first lecture in my university. But I believe that also molded me into the woman that I am now.
A couple of questions at that point. First, what if you can sort of like summarize, what does it take to be an actuary? That's for starters. And secondly, do you know how much your scholarship was worth? Like if you had to quantify it in financial terms, what was the actual worth of your scholarship to be able to get your actual science degree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the time, if I just do an estimate of how much they would have paid every single year, it's probably about 1.5 million shillings, including, the academic fees, tuition fees, and also accommodation. And there was also pocket money that was allotted in this scholarship. So
about 6 million.
about 6 million.
Years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. In dollar terms, what would that be? Like maybe $40,000 to $50,000.
Yeah.
Somewhere there.
Okay.
Or $30,000 to $40,000. So what was the other question
The other
again?
question was ultimately like
what does it take?
Yes. What does an actuary do? Like what ultimately what do you do, and why is it so difficult?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you have to be good at math, right? If you don't enjoy math, like I wouldn't encourage you to do actuarial science because you will hate life.
Yeah.
So really if I were to sum up what an actuary does, they manage risk. They manage complicated risk that you can't just manage by, the average risk manager who comes with a written report. There are calculations involved, right? And a typical actuary will work in an insurance company where the biggest liability of an insurer is how much they're going to pay policyholders. And an insurer doesn't know for sure. They don't know for sure when you're going to die. They don't know for sure whether you're going to pay this policy for the 20 years you've committed, right? And so those are assumptions that someone needs to model, and someone needs to tell them how much they need to put aside today for those future potential liabilities. So that's a typical work of an actuary.
Okay. This is just, satisfy my curiosity. What are some of the things that like you take into account when trying to figure out a calculation like that? Like what are some of the elements that you consider, and how do you even quantify those risks in now mathematical terms that you can then calculate?
Yeah. So, fortunately now there are many clever actuaries ahead of us who have come up with standard methods and, formulas to calculate the typical insurance risks like mortality risk, lapse risk. But as a switched on actuary should also think about the environment in which we live. So COVID was a very good example, in which some of those assumptions you might then increase them by 10 or 20% given the environment in which we live. And then you have to defend that, because that means you're telling the shareholders, oh, you need to keep more money aside for these liabilities. And what does that mean? That means there's less money available in the pot for them to distribute in dividends. So yeah, it's not just applying a formula, it's also applying your mind in being able to understand how the environment, how potential future economic conditions could affect, the assumptions that you've set, whether the assumptions are robust, looking back to, historical sort of events that have played out and how that has happened and how that could potentially affect the future.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Just for my own personal whatever, like I told you, I was, when I was getting my university degree, it was either between actuarial science or law. And then I decided, I had done enough math for my life, so
that was a good decision.
Yeah. Okay, and then so when you get this first offer from PwC, what's the offer? Is there any negotiation whatsoever, or do you just take whatever it is that they're giving you? And what do you begin to do with your money at that point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wonder why I didn't negotiate. But I just took it because I was just so elated that I had an offer way before, like I think it was 3 months before our graduation or the end of the semester. So I was just so happy. And I had worked with those people before, so I knew what I was going into. And I also didn't want to be the typical actuary working in an insurance company, sitting behind a desktop crunching numbers all day. All due respect to all actuaries, but that's what a typical actuary in an insurer would do. So I wanted to do consulting, and so when that opportunity presented itself, I grabbed it with all hands. What was the next question?
How much? What was the offer?
Oh,
Was
how
it? And
much?
what do you begin to do with your money at that
Oh,
point?
how
Yeah.
much? Yeah, so the offer was 20,000. I think it was 20,000 Rand. And this is like 12 years ago. So it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, equivalent of at the time in Kenya, I guess maybe just over 20,000 times seven, just 150,000 shillings
Per month.
per month.
Okay.
That's cost, no, that's gross income. So, obviously, after taxes and all, maybe it's 100,000.
Okay.
So I was earning well, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna live well. I'm gonna live in a great apartment in one of the most lush suburbs in Joburg, and I'm gonna drive a nice car. Because again, we didn't have conversations around money management, to be honest, in when I was growing up, right? The conversations that I vividly remember were, especially after my mother passed away, we can't afford, money doesn't grow on trees, where do you think we're going to get this money? It just was a lot of scarcity. And so when I got the money, I was like, let us spend it. Let us go all out and spend it. So that really is what I did. A lot of spending, a lot of flashing credit cards, and South Africa is a huge consumer economy. Like, consumption is everywhere. You just go to the mall, you can leave the mall after spending like 50,000 shillings very easily. So I would say the first few years of my career were that. And I think my money story or my money journey turned around really when I moved to Kenya after getting married. And getting married to someone who's very good with money. Yeah.
Was it a conversation? Because you're talking about someone who was very good with money. Was it a conversation you had before you got married? Did he know where you were at with money or what your money habits were like?
We didn't actually have a conversation around my money habits, but we did have conversations around what we wanted to do with our money, our vision, where we wanted to go in our life. So he probably saw it. I mean, it was obvious. I had no business driving a BMW at my age, at the age of 23, and I did.
Yeah.
So he knew it. And I guess he was willing to, take the plunge regardless.
Okay, so that's when your money sort of philosophy begins to change. What does it
Yes.
now change into now after you get married? So how do you begin to spend your money thereafter?
Yeah, so I think one of our values, our shared values, me and my partner, is in lived experiences. So travel. And I think when I started traveling, because I hadn't been exposed to that it was just traveling to Kenya, to the village, Ushago, visit grandparents, and that was it. Travel to US once as a child, but now it was very different. And I started to see the world very differently. And I think that's also when I started to think about money differently, because I started to think about the experiences I was creating from traveling versus the experiences I had from driving a fancy car. Like, which one would I choose? Definitely travel. And so I started to really think much more intentionally around how I wanted to spend my money. At that time, I also started to think about going into financial independence, because all my life I had been dependent either on my parents, then it was on the scholarship, then it was on a job. And I was like, this has to end. I cannot be dependent on someone else. Someone else cannot dictate how I'm going to live my life, which house I'm going to live in, the schools I'm going to take my kids to, because of how much they pay me. And so that's when I also started venturing into entrepreneurship. I tried a fashion-based business. Yeah, I've done so many things. And then I went into service-based businesses, and now that's what I do well with my real estate portfolio as well. So I would say that's when my money journey changed.
Your philosophy around money
Philosophy
sort of changes
around
at that
money
point.
changed,
Okay.
yes.
So how do you have like do you have a budget? Do you have a budget from what you can share with us and be like, okay, this is the percentage that I spend on like rent or utilities, or these are my expenses and these are my key investments and this is where I put my money and this is what matters to me. We had the CEO of Santa Re here like a couple of weeks ago, and he told us, for example, he doesn't spend more than 9% of his income on rent. Like he says, in fact, I think he said he would faint if he spent more than 9% of his income on
Yeah.
rent.
Yeah. I would say I have a plan for the big expenses. Yeah. So for the big things, rent, school, groceries, I would say I have a good hold on how much needs to go into those buckets.
Okay.
But I'm not a believer in being restricted from a spreadsheet. Because I think there's also a good balance to have. Like if I'm going to have to go to look at a spreadsheet every time I want to, I go to the mall and I want to maybe just buy sunglasses on a whim, like that feels restrictive to me. Instead, I would rather look at it from a values-based perspective. Like, does this purchase align with my values? Right. And obviously there is there is a limit to how much is available to spend.
Right.
But again, it's also aligned with my values. Like, am I going to take out the credit card to buy a pair of sunglasses? Probably not. Will I take a credit card to make an investment in my property business, which I know is going to pay me tenfold? Maybe I will.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So when you move back to Kenya, is that when you now it's KPMG that you moved? Is that when you begin to work for KPMG? Is it KPMG?
No, Deloitte.
Sorry,
No.
Deloitte.
So there's
Right.
a whole story around that.
Okay.
So I get married, head over heels in love.
Were you
pack
making
up.
any money as you were in love at that point?
Yeah, I was still working at
You were still
PwC.
working. Okay.
So I resigned literally 2 months before my wedding.
Okay.
And so I packed my bags, and it's probably a good thing that I got married at my age, 24, because I don't think I would do that now in my 30s. Pack my bags, literally move my whole life to a new country, and I'm starting from scratch. Fortunately, it's the same country I was born in, and I have family ties, but it's different. It's different when you move back in your 20s, because I don't have shared experiences with even my husband's friends. I couldn't even speak Swahili when I came back, and I had to learn all those things. And my accent, people would be like, "Where do you come from?" I would have to say things over and over for people to understand. So there was so much in that move, and I didn't know that it would be so hard to get a job. I mean, I was qualified on paper. I just needed 2 more years of experience to get my qualification, my certification, because that's a minimum requirement. But I had done all the exams, and I knocked on door to door, different insurance.
Certification
as a qualified actuary.
As a qualified actuary, okay.
So I would take my CV to all the big insurance companies, and they would be like, "We don't have anything for you. You only have 2 years of experience. You're overqualified." And that was the story that was continuously relayed to me for like 12 months straight. And so I got a breakthrough in a small bank called Sidian Bank after months and months of trying. And, it was so hard. It was so hard. And also at the time, my identity was very much wrapped up in the company I worked for. And now I didn't have a company I worked for. So I also was going through this identity crisis. So fortunately got a job there. I had actually tried applying, I had tried to get a job at Deloitte through a network, someone that I knew in South Africa who linked me up with someone who worked but at the time, they didn't have any available positions because they were just setting up the actuarial team. And so like a few months later, he asked me if I was willing to come and work for free. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not going to come and work for free or work as an intern. And
Right.
I am literally qualified on paper. So a few months after I got the job at Sidian Bank, he rings me again and he's like, "Hey, we have this position now open for manager. Is this something you're interested in?" And I say, "Yeah, I'll try. I'm willing to try." So I interview for it, go through the first round, all the psychometric tests, go into the interviews, do the assessment, there was even a presentation. And they're like, we love you, but you don't have business development experience. So sorry, we can't give you the job. Disappointment, but at least I had a job that I was working at.
Yeah.
And so a few months later, they call me again and they say, you know what? We weren't able to fill that position. Is this something you're interested in? And at that point, I'm like, I've got the power now. So I'm like, yeah, but you're going to have to give me a big pay raise. I'm not coming there with the offer that you gave me last time.
What was the initial offer?
I think it was like, yeah, I stand to be corrected. I think it was like 200,000 because that was how much I was earning at Citian Bank.
Okay.
And so I'm like, you've got to give me something good. And I start with 400,000. And they're like, no, we can't do 400. And then we settle at 350. And I move. And I'm like, okay, wow, things are turning around.
Right.
This is incredible. And again, the power of relationships and networks. And that's how I got into Deloitte.
Okay. Question on the process of getting into Deloitte. How rigorous? Because I've never. There's a part of me that I would say desired to work at, whether it's a Big Fours or like a McKinsey or a BCG. I always envied people who work there, and I've applied. I don't know how many times I've applied, but I've applied multiple times. I guess when I was pursuing employment. And people would tell me how vigorous and how rigorous that process is and all this stuff. So how difficult is it to actually make it, to be the person who gets offered the job?
It's hard. It's hard. And I've been at 2 Big Four firms. It's hard because they look at so many different angles of your cognitive, your like way of thinking. It's not just about whether you're book smart, right? So there's the psychometric assessments. Yeah, you can crack those. There are interviews. There are panel-based interviews. There's a presentation that you have to prepare. There's even group work. Like when I was interviewing for PwC, they gave us an assessment as a group, and you have to work with random people you've never met before, and you have to put together a presentation in like less than an hour. So there's so many different things that they're looking at: how you work under pressure, how you work with people you don't know, how you relate with them. Are you a leader, or are you just someone who's just a yes person? So but it also grooms you for the real world, because that's actually how the real world works out there. When you're going into boardrooms, when you're presenting to people who are almost the age of your parents, or even older, and having to think on your feet, being able to be calm under pressure. So yeah, very hard. And if you do get in, and it's the same with other consulting firms, the McKinseys and the likes, I mean, you should consider yourself as someone who knows what they're on about.
So do you think it's worth it, having been on the other side and having worked at the firm? And do you think it's worth it, or do you think they add like extra difficulty so that there's like the aura and the prestige of making it? You know what I mean? It's like it's like applying for a visa. It's really not that difficult, and it's a sticker on a passport. But it seems like because of the time they take to deliberate and decide and give you back your passport, is
it really worth it or necessary?
It's so grand.
I think it is. I think it is important because you're coming to represent their brand. And when you're in a consulting firm, you're not selling an insurance policy. You're selling a brand which comes with a certain reputation, certain expectations, certain levels of integrity, all the values that each of these firms say they represent. So I think it's important that they bring in people who, I guess, based on the few hours that they assess, that they feel we are confident to give you that level of responsibility to carry this brand.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So you sort of settle in. What's that process like? Because I know, and you mentioned, you sort of work to a place where you're earning over $100,000 a year. But what's the process to grow to that point like? And how are your other investments growing as your salary is also growing?
Yeah, good question. So when I actually have twin girls, so Nice to see you're a twin as well. I knew that I knew that there was going to be an end date to me in this corporate construct. Because I looked at them and I was like, I want to be there for these children. I want to be present. And I could see the path that I was on. I could see that it was not going to be aligned with the value that I uphold of family, of even travel, of fun, of being present as a mom. And so I knew I needed to start seriously working my corporate exit plan undercover. But I also had goals that I wanted to achieve while I was still in my corporate career. So I knew I needed to get to that next level. So at the time, I was a senior manager when I had my twins. And I wanted to have the word director next to my name. So again, my whole go-getter attitude, I was like, what is it going to take? Right. And I was open to mentorship. I'm really thankful for the people in that firm who mentored me into the next level. And I was also doing the personal development work, right? So on the side, I was also doing the work on my identity, on my thinking, that whole thoughts, feelings, beliefs, actions, results. And I think that also played a role in me literally accelerating time and making director in a very short space of time. So when I got back from maternity leave, I had taken 6 months off. Like I think it was within less than 4 months, I was told that I needed to start preparing for my director assessments, which, by the way, is an interview as well. Like you're interviewed and you're already in the firm.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, this is the opportunity of a lifetime, but I want to do it. And, I was fortunate enough, of course, I prepared, but I was fortunate enough to do very well. And then I was made director in June of 2022. Right. So all these things happen in such like a short space of time. And I was like, wow, like I have reached the helm of my corporate career at the age of 32. This is special. This is a moment to anchor into. But I also wanted to bring other women with me because I knew how hard it was to get there. I knew the roadblocks, the hurdles that I had to jump to get there because it wasn't easy at all, right?
Maybe just on that, I want to find out because you say from senior manager, you take very deliberate steps to open yourself up to directorship, and you say you begin to take mentorship. Like, what are the things that begin to change in your day to day? The tangible things that you begin to change that you say you can say attributed to you being able to get to that director position really quickly.
Well, my self-concept changed a lot. How I saw myself, even how I would, like my posture in meetings was very different. How I would be vocal around my opinions and views, very different. I would walk into the offices and in my mind, I was already director. Like my title was still senior manager. I was just like, reality is just taking a long time to catch up. But in my mind, I was already director. And so I was leading my team, speaking, engaging with clients from a very different level of authority to the woman that I was. And I still remember my boss saying, wow, the Rebecca I know now, sometime in 2022, he made this statement. He's like, the Rebecca I know now is so different to the Rebecca I knew a year, 2 years ago. And a lot of that was my self-concept work, the personal development work again, and really making decisions from that future self in the current sort of timeline. Yeah.
But would you say that, technically speaking, the work you were doing was still the
The
same?
work was the same.
It's just the way you would present yourself in
Yes.
this space that changed.
Yes.
Okay.
The work was the same. The team was the same, but how I made decisions, how I imposed my opinions in meetings, how I spoke up about my, beliefs on the direction we should take and different problems we were solving was very different.
Okay.
Yeah.
This might be putting you on the spot a little, but might you have like one scenario of like a meeting space or a place you were in where the previous Rebecca would not have spoken and would not have brought out our opinion or point of view, but then the person that you are now were bullish, almost bullish about what you said, and that
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, that's a key difference.
Yeah, well, I think even when I was negotiating, and I know this is already after the fact, but I didn't just accept the offer that I was given. I was like, you know what, I want a piece of my performance as well, and I want it to be written down so that I can unlock certain levels of income that are not available if I hadn't actually gone to negotiate. So I actually had put a whole proposal and pitch of, how I believe I would like to be remunerated. And, that was a bold move because most people would just accept the offer, like, you're being made associate director, what more do you want? And I was like, no, I know my worth now. I know what I bring to the table, and I want to be compensated accordingly.
Okay. And you would actively say that just that it sounds like a simple difference, but it's difficult to achieve. But just that mindset shift completely changed your earning ability, so to speak.
Yes, it changed the trajectory of even me sitting here telling you that I now own property worth $250,000, because where do you think the down payments came from to pay for those property? It came from all those bonuses that I unlocked from me being bold enough to ask for more.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many people go for these director assessments and don't cut it within a Big Four unit?
I don't know. I'll be lying if I say.
Keep you. So, and if you don't cut it, like, they just keep you at the manager level, or what happens? Or do
I
they get rid
think
of
at
you?
the point, I don't think they would ask you to do the assessments if they didn't see your potential. That's my view. But
are there people who they don't ask to do the assessments? Like, the people who just remain at, like.
To be honest, I don't know. I don't know of anyone personally. But I'd imagine there are, because not everyone is going to become partner. Yeah. Not everyone can become director. Right. And so I'd imagine those people would just naturally transition out of the organization to other places.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's work towards the tail end of your dramatic exit. Your very dramatic exit. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I know it's dramatic is because she shared a little bit of it before we started the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously confidentiality and all. I can't share all the details, but I and I share this very publicly on LinkedIn. I went from being a high performer, and 6 months later I was put on a performance improvement plan. And I think that was when I really woke up to the reality of, wow, the tables can turn so fast in a corporate career. Like, you think you are the cream of the crop, you are the favorite, and then one day all that can change, right? So I decided, you know what, I need to leave. I need to get out of this place. And I did not have the big cash reserves and all these grand plans that I thought I was going to have at the time of leaving. But I said this was the moment where I needed to say yes to myself and to really put my courage on the line and to believe that everything is going to work out. And the universe, God, has conspired to work in my favor even in this situation. And so I quit. And that was the end of my illustrious, prestigious corporate career.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, did you at all? I mean, yes, you talked about you didn't have the big reserves and any of those things, financial reserves. Did you get any panic attack, any panic moments about, okay, what's going to happen? Like, you talked about you have twins, you have investments you're planning. Yeah. What was the thinking around that?
Yeah, a lot of those moments. So the fact that you have done personal development work or you're operating at a higher identity level doesn't mean that you will not have fear, right? It doesn't mean that you will not have moments where you second guess yourself. And there was a lot of that in those moments. Will I be able to make this money again, right? Yeah. I had a lot of, and I realized after I left that, again, my identity was very much tied to my paycheck, right? Which is one of the things I help women break free from. and a lot of fears around whether I would be able to make this money or whether I would come back asking for a job again. And I still remember people saying, you know what, after a few months, you will be back here, right? And it's a year later, and I am doing better than ever.
Yeah.
So I think courage is not the absence of fear, it's taking action regardless. Right? And just being grounded in that belief that it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Right? I was so grounded that my success was inevitable.
Yeah.
It was not based on an employer, it was based on me and the decisions, actions, again, back to that framework that I was going to take from there on.
Okay. Tell us how you then decide to take 2 mortgages. It's 2 mortgages, right?
Yes.
At a point where you have no salaried income coming in, you're panicking half the time.
Yes.
How do you take a mortgage?
So
let alone 1, 2 mortgages.
Yeah, so I knew at the time that, and when you're in corporate, your paycheck is very powerful, right? Banks will give you so much more money than you even need to, just because of that paycheck, right? That's what they rely on. And so I knew I needed to make the most of it before I left. So obviously I did not tell the banks that, hey,
I'm just about
to leave. Yeah, but I knew that I also knew that it was going to take a while. I gave myself space and time to know that replacing my corporate paycheck was going to take time. Like, I didn't put pressure on myself to make back, the money that I was making in my corporate career in the soonest time possible. So I did that, but I also knew that the model that I was using to manage these properties and to make money from them, I knew that it was going to work, right? And it's not because I had a strategy, but it's also because of my identity. Like, I had so much evidence in my life. Look back to the stories I've shared. University, I get a scholarship. I get a job I finish my degree in record time. I qualify as an actor. I had so much evidence that I had made things work for me, and I am co-creating this with God, who I believe in. So I knew it was inevitable. It was going to work. And it's not a surprise that it has worked. Yes. So the mortgages, the rent that I get from these properties pay for the mortgage. And then there's an extra sort of cash flow that's left over that currently I still reinvest back into the property business.
Okay. So that's how sort of that system is.
Yes.
Is set up. Okay.
Yes.
What does success look like for you now as we sort of wind up? What does success look like for you financially?
Wow. I would say agency. Agency, the power to choose. The power to choose how I want my days to look like. Being able to create my schedule and not be forced to go to a board meeting because my boss couldn't attend and needs someone urgently to go. And now I have to I can't go to my kids' swimming gala. The agency to be able to wake up and say, I'm traveling. I'm going somewhere for 2 weeks, and not have to ask for permission to get annual leave approved. Like, I think these are some of the small things that when I was still in a corporate construct, I didn't realize how freeing it would be to be out of the system where those things were dictated and imposed on you.
Okay. I think that's a good way to define what success would look like. A final question. So, have you been able to completely replace all the income whatever your annual income was in a corporate space now in an entrepreneurship space? Or are you still on the road to fully replenishing all that money?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I still work, so I still have active income coming through, but it's in the form of consulting. And it's so interesting how now I work half the time, 2 to 3 days a week, and I make almost twice my take-home pay that I had when I was still working in a formal corporate career.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to just that belief that it's going to work. Because even how I got some of these consulting contracts, I think it's a miracle. It really is a miracle.
It doesn't do with your marketing ability.
Nothing. I didn't send my CVs to 100 different companies. I literally just asked my network, hey, I have this time. I still want to like build active income because I see that as seed capital to continue building my property portfolio. If you have opportunities, let me know. And that's how I got these opportunities. So I don't say this from a place of privilege. I really am grateful to be in this space, but it's also to show other women what's possible.
Yeah.
When you say yes to yourself and when you realize that you do not have to be stuck or feel like you are constrained because all you've known is a corporate construct. Like there actually is financial independence outside of that, and you can create it. Literally create it from nothing. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on Financially Incorrect. I've really enjoyed this. I've learned a thing or two. Literally from the beginning of this podcast, learned a thing or two. So I really appreciate you coming on here. I hope you guys will too. And thank you so much. We'll see you guys next Friday on the next episode of Financially Incorrect.